In this episode of Going For It with Becker, I sit down with David Masterson out of Arizona. In this conversation, we talk about the importance of sticking to the fundamentals, staying consistent when it's not exciting, and how small, disciplined actions over time can create massive results. There are some powerful takeaways in this episode, and I hope that you enjoy it. Let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of Going For It with Becker. I'm James Becker, and David, thank you so much for doing this today. And so welcome to the program.
Thanks. It's great to be here and looking forward to a chat.
So why don't you start off by giving some background to the audience, a little bit about you personally and a little bit about your real estate business.
Sure. So, originally started out as a teacher. I taught for 12 years up in Michigan. And on a whim one day, my aunt and uncle said, "Hey, you guys should move to Arizona and we should do real estate together. We'd have a lot of fun." And I guess I was having a bad day because I was like, "Sure, why not? Let's think about it," instead of just saying no. Um, but really wanted to get to somewhere where I could retire someday. I was looking at the writing on the wall and I said, retiring as a teacher, I might have to teach till I'm like 80, be able to do that. And didn't really want to teach till I was 80.
Yeah.
Um, and so kind of got into it with my aunt and uncle. They kind of helped launch me into the business. And then as they retired and kind of phased out, and as I kind of just took over and kind of kept growing things. And now, things are kind of exploding a lot thanks to Fusion's help in the last couple of years. But started in real estate 8 years ago, so not that long. But in that time, have become one of the top producers for the Green Valley area where I primarily work. And I love what I do. I often joke with my clients, um, real estate and education are really similar, except my class size is a lot smaller. And
Yep.
my clients usually want to hear what I have to say.
Yeah. That makes a big difference. We have a gal out of Dallas, one of our clients that does over 100 homes a year, Deborah Douglas, and she was an administrator. She was a principal of a junior high school, and I could see how that background could be very helpful for project managing and in the real estate business. As a matter of fact, we have, or I have had the experience of people who come from a corporate background or a structured background, such as teaching. Those individuals seem to do really well because they have a background of being structured. And a lot of real estate agents are just gunslingers. They're just winging it every single day. They have no idea what they're going to be doing. And those people that bring structure to the business end up doing a lot better if they're consistent over the long period of time. Have you seen that yourself in real estate?
Yeah, for sure. I think if to be in the classroom, you've got 100 things going at once, and you have to have systems and everything in place to make sure everything's happening. And it's no different with real estate. You can't do, you know, multiple deals all at the same time unless you've got, your checklists and your systems and your way you're going to do stuff, because otherwise you can't grow. You can't do what you want to do. I definitely went through that early on with getting bogged down with a lot of the minutia. And so when Fusion came along and said, well, let's take care of the minutia for you, it seemed like a good match because that was really where I was struggling to grow. Couldn't get over that hump,
Well, I
despite
mean,
all my systems.
the industry is sets us up to fail because they want the agent to do everything, and you can't do everything. You don't have the time to do everything, and so we do a bunch of stuff halfway. And there's a saying in Alcoholics Anonymous, which I love, which is half measures avail us nothing. And so if we do a whole bunch of half measures, there's a lot of activity, but not a lot of growth. And so we're happy to be helping you with some of that routine, minutia, boring stuff. But boring is where the money is won. I mean, that's just a fact. The other thing that I think is interesting is that when you're teaching, you have 28 or 35 different personalities in the room. You have to manage all of those people, but you also have to drive them all to the same thing, which is passing the class and moving on to the next stage, so to speak. That's not too indifferent than real estate, but you have to have a lot of repetitive routines, I'm sure, in class, and that's also pretty much the same way. People think real estate's so exciting. It's a bunch of boring if you're going to be successful. At least that's what I found. What have you found?
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of fun moments in a real estate transaction, but most of it's just, you do it one or two times. I'll have a client be like, well, I've sold 5 or 6 homes in my life. I know what I'm doing. And I laughed at one recently. I was like, well, I've sold 20 so far this year. So I
Yeah.
think you're in good hands. Don't worry. Because that minutia, it's easy to get lost, but people, yeah, I do see myself kind of as a guide, and I did the same in the classroom, just walking alongside of people, helping them through what they need, making sure they feel confident and informed so they don't have to, it doesn't have to be worry and stressful because, like you said, it's the same thing just over and over and over again. There's usually very few surprises.
Yep. Now you're doing a great business in one of the worst markets in 35 years. What do you think your secrets to success are, if there's secrets at all? But what are you doing, and what do you attribute your success to in this very, very difficult market?
Yeah, it's funny. I talked to a lot of agents and they're like, "Oh yeah, last year was just terrible for me." And I was like, "It was one of my better years that I've had." Um, and I do have to attribute a lot of that to Fusion, to be honest. I've had good years over the last 5 years or so. Certainly a good business, but could never kind of get over the hump. And I went, from 2023, I went down in my volume, and I was like, "What's going on? Why can't I keep this moving up?" Um, but the whole philosophy of like treating your sphere like they're your number one priority has really helped. I definitely see myself getting business that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. I get calls all the time. Some of those emails go out, hey, want to get together for a coffee? And it goes out to my entire SOI, and my inbox is flooded with requests to go out to coffee. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't have time for this many coffees in one week. But
It's kind of
everything.
cool that they want to do it, though,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, people, everyone who's worked with me has always liked me. I know that they would use me again. They would recommend me to their friends. And so giving them just that constant reminder, even my clients who are like, you don't have to waste money sending stuff to me. Like, I'll
Yeah.
call you when I need you. But um, I think it's definitely helped me grow.
Pe- pe- People have great forgetters, though.
They do. They
I
do.
mean, the forgetters are very active. One of the things that we believe here at Fusion, and I'm sure Aaron talks about it, but the amount of frequency in the marketing is really critical. And we have clients that are like, oh, I'm sending out too much, I'm doing too much, so forth and so on. And I tried to explain, I tried to have our executives explain to the client that their clients, their prospects, number one, there's almost $7 billion being spent annually to
Oh,
take
yeah.
that business away from them, literally. And so those other people aren't stalling out. And if they don't mail, it's just being replaced by someone else. There's almost 5 million advertisements that someone sees a year.
That's crazy.
Us taking our stuff down, like, what does it matter? We just did a case study on Progressive. I don't know if you know this, but Flow debuted in 2008. And so Flow, we follow the tenets of their marketing, where they have a basic theme. There's tons of frequency. There's lots of different channels in which they use, and they started off spending $300 $1 million a year, and each year they increased it by $100 million. But 15 years later, they went from being worth $10 billion to today
Oh,
$120 billion. And I'm sure that the CEO of Progressive, when he was at a cocktail party, had people say, I'm so sick of Flow, stop marketing. And I'm pretty
yeah,
sure all he did was increase it.
yeah,
So if you want to be worth billions of dollars, like Anthony Robbins says, success leaves clues, right?
yeah.
Yeah, like so that's a good one to follow. Do you struggle with that at all? Like feeling like you're marketing too much?
At first, I did. I thought, is this really necessary? Like, can I just keep, doing the emails, the free stuff? Like,
Yeah.
well, my clients love me already. Do they really need to see these pieces? But then, especially a lot of those big impact pieces that have gone out,
Yep.
they generate phone calls. People, oh
Yep.
wow, that was a great piece. Like that was really cool. Or like the Christmas cards, the story I got when my story letter went out. Like the
Yep.
calls I got, oh, I was crying, and I was so happy that you sent that. That was such a
I
good
love it.
story. Like so I think that feedback just reminds you that people want to hear from you and they want to be
Yep.
kind of part of what's going on in your life, not just the
Yep.
small part that you played helping them through a transaction 2, 3, 4, or 5 years ago.
Yep.
Um, and I think there's some people that are just going to toss it in the trash, but I think for every person who does that, there's two of them that be like, "Oh yeah, David," like, and it just reminds them of what I'm doing and that I'm still here. That so
Yep.
many agents disappear over time. Um, and I'm not one of those. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I'll be around. I'm going to be here.
Yep.
That's for the long haul.
There, the high impact pieces are so important, and one of the reasons why we have them in there is an advertising guy who's it's a British guy by the name of Rory Sutherland. Are you familiar with him at all?
I don't think so.
Okay, so he's kind of a contrarian thinker, and he is the guy that came up with the black card for American Express, which was, this really expensive thing that people all wanted to have the black card. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I really enjoy listening to him. And he has this in advertising, something that he calls expense signaling. And when companies spend more money than what their competition is, it signals a commitment to their craft. It signals that they believe in their product. It signals that they're more successful because they're spending more money, and it's biological. And I'll give you an example. So, if someone is going to propose to their significant other, and let's say a guy's watching a movie on the couch with his girlfriend and chewing popcorn, and with this mouthful of popcorn, go, we should get married. That's one proposal, right?
Right.
And then there's the guy who flies in the parents of the fiance potentially, and flies in the sister, and writes poetry, and puts together a flash mob or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of planning and a lot of effort, and buys a big ring and plans this big thing. What is the message by going to all that trouble that he's sending versus the other one? It's the same question. Yep. And it's significantly different. And it's so interesting because we have so many agents that say, just send out the free stuff. We'll just do the digital marketing. But they don't understand the signaling and the message, the subconscious message that comes across that people aren't even really aware of, the consumer's not aware of, and the agent's not aware of. But I think it is, super important, the depth of some of those things.
One I know
We
in my marketplace,
Go
like
ahead.
I'm one of the few that are really doing that. There's a lot of great agents in our town, but they don't go after their sphere like I'm going after my sphere. They're not doing those steps. And so I think it does help you stand out in a marketplace of people who are just hoping somebody calls them on the phone versus, proactively, calling other people and getting a hold of them and going after their business, even if that business is years away, you know.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So 90% of people are going to buy or sell a property in the next 10 years. And if you market more than anybody else by a significant amount, and let's just say we spend $25 per year on that one person, so that's $250 that we spent. And if we can close 70% of those people, and if our average commission is $10,000, the ROI is like off the chart.
Mhm.
But if you have to have something right now, you end up selling your soul. You're doing these things like buying leads from some of the portals, which, I mean, I can't imagine a worse thing of following up with 50 people to close one deal where there's 50 other agents following up with them, and
And
where
I mean,
in the
obviously
sphere
get,
of influence, it's come list me calls versus them
and I
ghosting you
get
or any of that stuff.
those solicitation calls all the time. They're like, oh, we're going to do this for you. We're going to do this. And I love being able to say, that doesn't fit my marketing plan. That's not how
Yeah,
I do business. I don't have to do business like that. Thanks for your time.
yeah,
Goodbye. Like, um, actually having a plan in place that's working,
yep.
gives you the confidence to say no to those short-term, money grabs that people are just trying to get you, business now, which doesn't usually
Well,
work.
that's one of the hard parts of us um, bringing on more clients because we tell people this is not an overnight thing. It doesn't work that way. Anything that has real value takes time, and but it's kind of like I use this analogy. My grandfather was a peach rancher. He ran orchards for 35 years, and they did primarily peaches and plums, which are plums are grown on a tree, and so are peaches. And when you plant a new orchard, which it's not seedlings, they're plants that are trees that are 4 feet tall when they put them in, but they still aren't going to get any fruit for 3 or 4 years because the trees have to grow where they can hold the fruit and all those types of things. But once those trees come in, they're going to produce for 2 decades a ton of fruit. And as long as you take care of it and water it, and you have to prune the trees and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the way I look at it. If you can have the patience to plant an orchard, and that's really what your database is, and it
Yeah.
can produce forever. You have to prune every once in a while. You have to add to it, and those types of things. But it's once it's going, and it's a pretty awesome experience. Tell me what one of the things we talk about at Fusion, the number one fundamental is being the agent that you would hire, like being the best in your market. What is it that you do that you feel is above and beyond what most agents do?
I think communication for me is really important. Um, I am glued to my phone. So when people call, I pick up. I hate sending people to voicemail. Like it actually pains me to have to call people back. So I'd rather interrupt dinner and pick up a phone call just to get that done and checked off. And so I think that responsiveness piece, people appreciate. Um, I also just treat people like my friends, like the way I would want to be treated. I talk to them like they understand what's going on, and if they don't, then I explain it to them. I think that education or background comes back into play where, I can explain things how things work, what's the next step,
Yep.
what do we have to do? Um, and I'm insanely patient. Um, and that again comes out of the classroom with dealing with, 100 plus kids every day. So people appreciate that about me. Um, I often also get that I'm like the least pushy realtor people have ever met. I've never twisted somebody's arm to buy a house. I have a client right now. I think in the last 2 months, we've seen 40 homes. She just finally decided on one. Um, and great, I'm excited for her. It took some time, but at least she now is happy and satisfied with the home she picked. Um, without me trying to pressure her, being like, "Oh, we should have bought this house, a month and a half ago." I'd rather people come to that decision, and I'm there when they are ready.
Yep. Yeah, I could see how the teaching thing would help. What was the grade level that you were teaching at, David?
I taught middle school and high school,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
So, one of the things about teachers, looking back on I I don't know what they are like now, but back in the horse and buggy days when I was going to school, um, they had empathy, they had patience, they act like they cared,
Mhm.
but they didn't put up with any baloney, and so
That's
they
true.
they were they were able to have boundaries without having to communicate those boundaries very clearly, right? And yet, so they could take care of it, and that's a nuanced mix of emotions, and I could see, just the way that you communicate with me, you feel very safe, but you don't come across as someone who's going to suffer fools very easily.
That is true. I I'm not afraid to tell people the truth, even if it's something that's not going to be very pretty for them. Or,
Yep,
I'm the first to say in a listing presentation, I could tell you your house is worth this much, but I'd be lying. You know,
yep,
just I'd rather be brutally honest with people, and set realistic expectations than to, come across like I'm not telling the truth at any point. That's
yep.
not. I get that from
I
other agents too. They're like, "How do you get people to do stuff?" I'm like, "I just tell it the way it is." I'm
Yep,
not gonna like you said, suffer fools.
yep. One of the things I did with buyers that was really effective, but would help them make decisions a little bit sooner without pressuring them. But it was a little bit of a, it would be a challenge for them. Is I would tell them, I don't want you to write an offer until your head, your heart, and your gut all line up. The problem is that if you're not being discerning through the process, you're going to look at 10 homes, you're going to say which one had the pink tile in the bathroom, which one had the palm tree in the back. They're all going to run together. And so what I want to do is, I don't care if we look at 5 homes or 100 homes, doesn't matter to me. But what I want you to do, and I would do this in the buyer consult, is that when we would go look at the very first property, hypothetically, that's the property you're going to buy. And then we go to the next property. And before we look at the third property, I want you to take the first house, that condition, that master bedroom, that kitchen, the neighbors, that school district, everything wrapped up into one with the price, and then take the other house, that kitchen, that master bedroom, that lot, the neighbors, that school district, all wrapped up into one. And I want you to say which one is the better buy. And if it's number two, number one goes away. We never think about it again. And then every single house that we go to, we're comparing it to the very best choice. And so the next three, if it's not three, it goes away. The number four, four goes away, five goes away. And then what happens is, if number two is the best one, and you look at 12, and that's what I found is almost always it's about 12 homes when people start to write offers. It's enough for them to feel like they're doing the market, but they have to make critical decisions. And it's not me trying to get them to buy something, it's me helping them to practice on making decisions. Because if someone comes across a great deal and they don't move, they potentially might lose out on something that's good. Now, I don't want to force them to do it, but making decisions for some people is really difficult.
For sure.
And the most successful CEOs and entrepreneurial people are people that make really good decisions. And buying a house is a business decision, which is important. Anyhow, I don't know if that is something that you would ever want to implement, but that was always something. And as long as you didn't say you had to buy something, you just like, okay, just get rid of everything else but that best one. And that's what you're always comparing it to. And so that was something that worked for me. How does your listing presentation, what does that look like?
Usually start with show me around your house. Talk to me about updates, give me the tour, just let them talk and I tend to shut up and listen. Um, and then sitting down and going through um essentially the Fusion kind of listing program I've kind of
Yep.
modified a little bit just to work for me and my
Right.
market. But talking about the agent that, I would hire,
Yep.
and what's important to
So you've
me.
adopted our suggestion. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it works really well. I have the printed brochure with me, so it's something I can leave behind with them.
Yep.
Um, and I think it's something that, even when I was working with my aunt and uncle, we'd go to listing presentation, they would just go and they would talk and talk and talk. And, I would talk to other agents, well, what are you doing in a listing presentation? I'm like, well, we just go and chat. And so actually having a full presentation,
Having
I
a
think,
plan.
yeah, it's a
Yep.
plan. Like there, oh,
Yep.
you've really thought this through. You know what you're going to be doing. And if you've thought through this presentation, well, then you're thought through how you're going to sell my house in that same kind of way. And I think that carries over. But yeah, typically I have a pretty high track record of going on those listing meetings and then getting the listing. That it's very rarely that they don't call me back and say, "Hey, let's go with this." So, yeah, it's worked really well, and it really focuses on the tenants from Fusions being the agent you want to be.
The that listing
Be hired.
presentation is actually something I developed in 91 or 92. The market in Sacramento had crashed. We had three military facilities, two bases, and a depot that were closing down when Clinton was trying to balance the budget in the early 90s during that recession. And it was the worst market I've ever been in. There'd be houses, signs on every house, and I was mid 20s and totally felt out of my league. And so, I was just thinking, like, I want to be the best agent I possibly can be. And so, how am I going to be the best agent? And I thought, well, it's really not me that has to decide that. It's my potential clients that have to decide that. And so then I was thinking, and, this was over a couple day period. I said, well, if I was going to list my house, if I was a client, what would I want? And then I thought, well, I'd want someone who called me back. I want someone who had a team. I want someone to do a lot of marketing. I want someone who cared about me. So then I put this structure together. And so I just took this experience and I kind of wrote out the formula. And I used to go against some of the top people because I was doing expired listings at the time, and it would just kill because it was just so real. Like, this is what I want. Is that what you want?
Yeah,
And they go, yeah, okay. Let me explain specifically how I do those things. That formula is something that came about naturally about me just trying to solve how a young 20-year-old could beat a 45-year-old or 50-year-old that had been in the business a long time. And that so interesting because just, this basic thing about being the agent you would hire, like that doesn't get old. It doesn't go away.
right.
The value system. So I don't know if you're interested in that story, but I thought I would
No, it's great
share
to
it.
know the history of kind of how that came about.
Yeah. So if you were meeting with a person who wanted to get into real estate and they're gonna get into it, knowing what you know and knowing about how many people struggle and knowing what's made you successful, what's the advice that you would give to them?
Um, I think back to the advice my uncle gave me when I was talking about possibly getting into, joining with them. And he said, David, real estate's a lot like pushing a rock up a hill. And you push and you push and you push, and it's a lot of work. And then you eventually peak that summit, and it starts to roll and it just progresses and it's a lot easier. But he's like, it
Yep.
might take you 18 months, 2 years to push that rock up the hill to where
Yep.
you really have the business that you want to have. And that was true in my experience. Though that first 2 years it was rough. It was hard. It was a lot of work, a lot of time. It was endless hours, with very little to show for it.
Yep.
But you see that moment if you as you look at my data where the rock started going over the hill. And yeah, there are times where it dips and it falls, but it's much easier to kind of keep that going now than it was at first. And I think that's what most agents think. Oh, real estate, quick, fast money, easy. And
Easy
it's not.
money.
It's not
Easy
easy
money.
money. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time, and it's not a guaranteed payday. So
Yeah.
you've got to be ready for those pitfalls. But for those that are willing to, put in the time and the work, it's a fun business. It's great. I get to do something different every day, meet new people all the time, and that's what I
Yep.
really love about it.
Yeah. The statistics are that 90% of all agents leave the business entirely in the first 5 years. 90%. 75% fall out in the first 18 months. And the people who have beginning luck, they'll sell to a family or whatever, that sell one home, 50% of those people that sell one home will never sell another home. I mean,
Crazy.
it's brutal. So I have people that sometimes ask me, I'm one of those truth tellers. Like I'll tell people what they don't want to hear. That's my love language, if you will. I tell people, don't do this unless you're going to be willing to do what you did, which is push a rock uphill, a big rock uphill for a long time.
For a long
And
time.
I mean, what your uncle said was perfect. Like, either you come in and you do this 110%, or you will fail. It'll be a complete waste of time.
Mhm.
And so, save yourself the heartache unless you're willing to come in and go for it. And that's what it sounds like you did.
Yeah, I it was a lot of work, but it paid off in the end. I got the business and the career that I envisioned when I signed up that first day.
What do you see for the future for your business? What's your vision for your business in the future?
It's kind of changed a lot over the last couple of years, but I now see myself as someone like growing beyond just myself, getting a team, having other agents working with me, launching other agents into the business. You get to a certain spot, you're like, there's only so much you can do by yourself, and even transaction managers, other you can get help, but
Yeah,
um, I think that appeals to the educator and me too. Going back to that. Helping other agents, mentoring other agents, helping them get their start. Um, I can see that now, like that team,
yeah.
that
Are
prospects.
you are you in our TMX program?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. We're just getting that wheels turning on that. We're just planting the orchards, but it's starting to pick up. It's exciting.
So yeah, I'm excited about that. I kind of have a few agents in town that I'm kind of starting to sprinkle some breadcrumbs in front of to see if I can't get them to kind of join on board too. So,
Yeah, all
um,
you got to do is get them into one of those meetings. We have one every day, and then
okay,
we'll help you from there. So we
awesome.
can explain that for you. David, this has been a lot of fun to get to know you better. Um, you're obviously just a class act. I know Aaron, your partnership executive, thinks the world of you. And I'm really grateful and honored to be in business with you. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I would say the same, James. I'm thankful that Fusion came along, and called me, and then I agreed to some meetings and signed up because I've heard it on other podcast stuff. I don't think I want to go back to doing it the old way. So
Yep.
looking forward to a long partnership for sure.
Well, that's what we're looking forward to. And thank you for doing my podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.